All right, everyone, we've got to talk about the economy, and it sort of ties in as well with the tax bill. So I'm just going to conjoin these two into one video. Right now, economists, those unnamed, vacuous individuals that pretend that they can actually predict what markets will do. If they could, by the way, they'd make enormous amounts of money as people pay them for prognosticating. Basically, it's just them throwing their shit at the wall and hoping it sticks in the right direction. They're saying, well, the tax bill is going to increase income inequality. It's going to fuck up the economy. That's funny because most economists, like, our old friend Krugman, the one that looks like he has a piece of roast beef for a face, were predicting that the stock market would basically sputter out and crash and we'd be in another recession by now if Trump was elected. Oh, if Trump is elected, don't vote for Trump. It's going to destroy the economy of the United States. Everything will be totally messed up. You won't even have to wait for it. They were saying the same, by the way, about Brexit. Now, that hasn't caused the economic apocalypse that supposedly it would. Now, that I think would be much more substantial as far as something that could destabilize your economy, too. That involves leaving a rather major union of states and years of protracted negotiations over what form that takes. We just elected a new fucking president. He's just the charismatic figurehead of the country who happens to head one of three branches of government. That's less substantial than something like Brexit, despite the fact that he happens to be Donald Trump. Now, I have to say, those stories you see infrequently about people who are in the coma, like before the election, now they've woken up and they're like, oh, your president's Donald Trump, and they don't believe it. I can understand that, because a lot of people wouldn't have suggested that he would ever actually run maybe a couple of years ago. Because he kept toying with the idea, but he kept putting it off, like he wouldn't sign the paperwork, said maybe I could run, but I don't really want to. He was saying that in the 80s, so people always wanted him to. By the way, he would have done the same thing in the 80s, only back then, he would have had to run as a liberal Democrat and say, yeah, I love gay marriage and abortion's great. He would have had to have done like literally a 180 in order to be edgy and get people offended back in like the 1980s. He would have had to have been like a Jimmy Carter almost. Say, oh, you fuck Ronald Reagan, basically. He would have been like maybe a Clinton or something. Honestly, oh yeah, I had sex with that woman. Extramarital sex is great. He would have had to have said something like that. Oh, Satanism, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, I did some rituals the other day. That's why I'm so rich. But the Dow now climbing above 24,000. Record highs again. It keeps beating all expectations. Krugman expected, well, it's going to stagger around. Maybe it stays the same, but it probably like drops like a rock and we hit like... It's going to basically be like the 1930s again, people, if Trump wins the election. Has that happened? And then I hear, when these same economists, therefore, they talk about the tax bill and say how horrible it's going to be. I assume it's going to be pretty good. Now I look at it and I say, well, ultimately, if the deduction has increased, the standard deduction, I can still take my business deductions. I understand that it cuts out charitable contributions for the middle class, like non-corporate taxes. Charitable contributions are no longer something you can deduct. Yeah, okay, well, maybe that's not the greatest thing in the world, but is it doomsday? Can we be honest? Is that really fucking doomsday? Is the average person going to go broke because their charitable contributions can't be written off? Well, then just don't make as many charitable contributions. Look, a lot of you people want the government to handle charity anyway. So why the hell would you want to donate anything? You want the government to force you to donate money. It's probably why you're concerned about this, because it drops taxes for the majority of the population. Don't give me that bullshit about it raising your taxes. You're not looking at it properly. But as far as I'm concerned, it's going to be great for me. Because I looked at like sort of the general tax plan that I would have been under. I'm going to pay less. I'm going to pay some thousands of dollars less in taxes as the result of this when it passes. So I would like to thank Trump. You're saving me money. Yeah, of course I'm going to support it. I'm sorry. I'm going to be a little bit greedy when it comes to that. Say, okay, well, somebody else, maybe they pay more. Most people are going to pay less under this plan. It's not going to screw the look. There will be some elements. It looks like the way the bracketing is structured, some elements of like the lower middle class might pay a bit more. Everybody else pays less. But the thing is, overall, if you get the economy moving again, it's starting to rev up now, and it has been for a while. In all honesty, it's not just Trump. It was already beginning to build up steam. Once Trump got elected, though, all that steam gets released. Now it's like surging. Trump being there gives people more confidence, I think, because he's the money man. He's the symbol of American consumerism. Donald Trump. You can't get anything better. You'd have to go back to talk about the Vanderbilt or something 100 fucking years ago to find a symbol of big time money more than Donald Trump. It gives people confidence. And if it helps the businesses be confident, maybe they think, oh, maybe some of these businesses can come back from overseas. Now, maybe we can deal with this. The tax plan looks good. We can hire more people. Maybe some of those people are actually, maybe this raises people from the lower rungs to the middle class. Some people from the middle class, maybe they do entrepreneur stuff, they get rich. Like I'll use myself as an anecdote. A couple of years ago, I was poor. I had basically no income. I started building up steam, and based on my self-employed income, I'm now in the upper middle class. This tax plan helps me. It would have helped me hell if I had been starting out just now. I've been like, yeah, no, this is good. And it also simplifies the system, it seems. So things are going fine, and then people tell me it's a bubble. Yeah, maybe. It's possible. Can you adequately predict that? None of these economists can predict whether we're in a bubble right now. Or whether maybe we're correcting upward for all you know. Maybe the economy is roughly where it should be. You're not far ahead. You have no idea what the baseline is supposed to be. You can sort of follow a trend. If you look at really, really long term, you know, the stock market itself, you can sort of draw out a line. Over time, though, it's going to incline in its growth anyway, because the qualitative side of our economy is going much more quickly than it did in the past. You know, the 100 years it took to develop the cotton gin, now it takes 10 years to develop some battle droid or something, some car that can fly through the air. Things are moving more quickly. I would like to believe that, in all honesty, I'll say another thing. It's entirely likely we are in a bubble of sorts, so I'm not going to discount that. When's it going to pop? Do you necessarily, Spencer says next autumn. I take him up on that bet and say no. If it pops at all on Trump's watch, it would be in the second term. That's honestly what I think. I could be wrong. Could be my predictions to, this isn't exactly politics, it's economics, not exactly my forte. I get the general feeling, though, that at least the illusion of consumer confidence and growth can be maintained for a few more years. At least the illusion. That trickles down to actual economic growth, below the speculation, yes, but actual growth. And it never bottoms out to the same level it did when, we had the Bush-Obama recession. And it took both of them. It takes two to tangle, trust me. I always wondered, some people say it takes two to tango. Others say it takes two to tangle. So I'm not exactly sure which originates where. I think tango was the original, though. Just an aside. But yeah, the Dow's doing well. And I realize the stock market isn't the same as, like, Main Street. They're not the same thing. The fact that the stock market's roaring ahead doesn't necessarily mean that we've actually got massive growth impacting the people you want it to impact, which generally you're talking about the middle class. You want them to be able to consume more, to get ahead more, to have more property, a share of the wealth of the economy. That's healthy for your economy. It's sort of like diversifying a portfolio, I suppose. The idea, though, being implanted in people's heads, that Trump does not care about anyone who's not super wealthy. How do you know that? You're looking at you're cherry picking through the tax plan and you're assuming that it's going to screw a bunch of people. Why don't you implement it and see if it does? And then urge Congress to repeal it if indeed it screws things up. And if it does well, then you maintain it and say, well, maybe we tinker a little further. Maybe we just sit on our laurels because it's doing fine now. Why don't we do one of those two things? It would make more sense. But people simply aren't willing to give it a chance. Like even when Obama came in and tried to restructure everything, there were a lot of people who were averse to even bothering to try to stabilize the economy in the manner in which he prescribed. I figured that it wouldn't help either, and indeed it didn't. It prolonged the Great Recession. His high tax, high spending plans didn't actually create any significant real growth. He then backs off on aspects of it, and then real growth begins in his second term. That was the funny part. Once he gets hobbled and can no longer fuck around with the economy, things got better. And yeah, 14th greatest president. Bullshit. As far as the Trump tax plan, which he's owning, this is the Trump tax reform that we're looking at. It's not Senate GOP tax reform. Trump's name's all over it. He's proud of the fact that he helped hammer this out. Let's see if it works. I think it will. I think it'll do just fine. And if it turns out that I'm wrong, then repeal it. It's as simple as that. It's not like you can't. Hell, most of these people believe Trump won't even be in office in another 6 months to a year or something, so what the fuck are you so worried about? Okay, for one tax season, you paid 2% more. Really going to destroy a lot of lives. Well, that you're expecting Trump's going to be impeached, so again, who cares? Wouldn't that tarnishing of his legacy indicate that you would have to destroy every bit of legislative material that he ever put his name to, like, go back to square one and pretend his presidency never happened? Couldn't you do, you got enough never-Trumpers in the Republican Party to have the votes to do something like that. So, they would flee like rats off a sinking ship. Of course they'd be willing to tear up the Trump tax reform and go back to the Obama-era tax system, or even the Bush-era tax system. If indeed that happens, as you are speculating it to do. It is funny, though, the same people proclaiming that this is going to fuck with the economy, it's going to ruin lives, income inequality, are the same people that were predicting his mere election would collapse the stock market and cause another recession. It would simultaneously pop the student loan bubble, the housing bubble, the bubble. And that's really the problem. The student loan bubble is what you really have to worry about right now. If anything explodes in our faces, it's going to be student loans. It's not going to be something, it's going to be student loans that is the primary origin of our misery. Oh, it's going to be a great recession, maybe even a minor depression when it happens. But when does it happen? What real growth have we achieved before it happens to hopefully recover more quickly? Trump, I think, is aiming towards the latter, and he's saying, well, if we can just rev up the engine of industry and get enough jobs and enough wealth pumped into the middle class, then maybe it's easier to deal with it once these things pop. Also, if you lift people out of poverty, you don't have to keep subsidizing and throwing free money to them. Things get cheaper on that end. Maybe they can pay off those student loans. Maybe you can stave off the bubble altogether, if you can get enough growth. Let's at least give him a chance to try. He's Donald Trump. That is a unique qualification on the economy. On foreign policy, no, it doesn't give him any unique qualification. Yeah, okay, he's talked to people in foreign countries while doing business before. Not quite the same as political diplomacy. On other aspects of domestic policy, well, no, that's, there is no such thing as someone qualified on these things. There's no such thing as a person qualified to make moral judgments in legal terms anyway. The government shouldn't even be involved in such things, as far as I'm concerned. But on the economy, yeah, he's got the chops to do that. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to balance a budget in the most literal sense. So why don't you give him a chance to see if Trumponomics will actually work. And by the way, he'll gladly accept that moniker. He won't have a problem with it. It's just like Obama with Obamacare when he said, well, I'm kind of fond of that term, when he thought it would work, and then it blows up in his face, of course. It goes back to being the ACA pretty quickly. Now we call it Obamacare again because polling indicates more than half of the people support it because the Republicans, completely fumbled on it. But this is a campaign promise that Trump did make. He said, I'm going to reform the tax system. Most people will pay less. Yeah, I'm going to drop the business tax rate. He's dropping it to 20%. Small businesses will no longer have to feel so much of a pinch. They'll be able to compete with larger businesses. Maybe they grow. Maybe they employ more people. For those smaller factories and manufacturing plants and storefronts in small town America, it could very well be morning in America again. Do you realize how popular he'll become? People forget about Russia. Oh, they'll forget about it real quick. They'll forget about any sex allegations against Trump. They won't care. They'll vote him back into office if this works. He knows that. He knows that it's all about the money. He needs to win over a couple million Americans in order to be reelected. That's what it boils down to. A few million people. That's a drop in the bucket of the total population. He needs to swing approval by 2 or 3 points in order to ensure reelection. He knows that. With the Democrats on the ropes, that's all he needs. And I think he wants to go further. He wants to pump so much wealth into the economy that he's remembered as the greatest money president. At this point, he may have given up on being the greatest charismatic ideologue, but he can certainly be the best money president, or at least another Ronald Reagan on the economy, which, of course, is more, again, it's a half projection, but it's certainly something. It's better than Obama or Bush, let's put it that way. He knows that that's what he's ultimately up against. He's being judged based on the last few presidents. So, I'm going to enjoy it, I think. I believe I will pay substantially less. Based on my reading of it, it looks like $3 or $4 grand I'll save, honestly. Yeah, that works for me. That's about all. Peace out.